respond from this group?
We had a pretty decent practice yesterday. I think Sunday we gave them the day off. Today's Tuesday, yeah. So yesterday we had a pretty decent practice. We showed them some clips where we have to do better, and we showed them some clips where we did some good things, and yet it wasn't good enough. And I think that's part of the learning process too. We've probably shown this team more clips from games than we have any in the last 3 or 4 years at least, and because I think it's still part of the learning process with this group.
Have you heard about the Duke for Dean t-shirts that are being passed out for Cameron tomorrow?
I haven't heard a thing.
That a former Duke alum is making these t-shirts that are in the form of they're Duke blue, and they're in the form of just the regular Duke t-shirt, but they say Dean on the front, and they're handing out, I think 500 have been pre-ordered already.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's a little bit like I said after the Pittsburgh game, we get so much, everyone jumps on the negative parts, but there's some really good things about in college athletics. I think the players gain from making sacrifices towards a common goal. I think people look at it as entertainment, and I think that's a huge part of it, and I think that the students, you know, at Cameron, they are off the charts, but I have never had, I've been back 12 years, I've never had anything that they've said or did that bothered me. They just cheer like crazy for their team, and I'd like to see one of those shirts and a whole bit, but I think that just says some things about two things. One, the biggest one, is the respect that Coach Smith had everywhere. You may not have cheered for him, or he wasn't coaching your school, but the respect that he had was just unmatched. And then the other thing, I think it's this is a big-time rivalry, but it doesn't have to be hatred. You can still have a great rivalry.
Well, at what point do you feel like the Duke rivalry kind of surpassed all others? Because talking to Phil Ford, he mentioned that back in the 70s, his main rival was NC State, and then Virginia for a while, early 80s. But
yeah, I think right after Virginia's run, when Mike got there and had the first 2 or 3 years, and Tom Butters stood up for him, and they had Amaker and Mark Allery and Johnny Dawkins and those guys, and all of a sudden they were really, really good. And it's been a long time there that both programs were really, really good, going to so many Final Fours. But I think during the mid-'80s is when it took a step ahead of everyone else. When I came to school here, people talked about the Duke-Carolina football rivalry, and I never felt that. And the basketball thing, it was North Carolina State. And when I first came back here as a coach, it was still that way, but it changed over during that time period to Duke, and I don't think it's stepped back in at all.
Coach, what kind of problems does Okafor possess to your defense?
Well, you're talking about a guy who's 6'11", 270 is what I heard one of the tapes, one of the commentators make on the broadcast of the game I was watching last night. So he's a load, but he's very gifted. Got great feet, great hands, turns to either shoulder. He's got touch when he turns, shooting 66% from the floor, and probably 64% in the ACC play where the competition is really good. So it makes you, you have to make some allowances for him. And I said earlier today, I think offensively they have the best balance of any team in college basketball, because they can score inside and they've got terrific three-point shooters, and that may make them more difficult to guard than anybody. And I'm not saying they're bad defensively at all. It's just that what they challenges they pose to you on the offensive end, trying to stop them, is really unlimited.
After watching the film, how much of Saturday was you guys? How much of it was Pitt just being hot?
A little bit of both, but I don't think that we played as well defensively, particularly in the first half. In the second half, I thought we had 3 major defensive breakdowns in 3 plays, but I thought, I can't remember the exact number, but there were several plays that we gave the guy that's guarding the shooter a good defense, and they still made the shot. And so you have to congratulate them. And somebody said they thought they had a great chance against Virginia, and I said, man, it's hard to shoot 66% in 2 games in a row. And but I think Jamie had them at a peak level for them, and you guys have heard me say a lot of times things about golf. I've always thought the more you make, the more you make. If I make the one on the first hole, I think I'm gonna make one on the second hole. And I think they got confidence early. And in golf, you also see guys in the same group where the guy starts making birdies and so does the other guy. You know, they sort of get caught up into that, and I think that's what happened to them is they were so confident. I mean, I know a couple of those times I would think that they took a couple of shots that Jamie didn't even want them to take, and they made them. And he did the smart thing as a coach. He just clapped and went on about his business kind of thing. But so it was a little bit of both. We weren't as bad defensively in the second half as I thought we were when I looked at it on tape.
Since they were off the charts, was there something that was more alarming to you than usual after a loss? Or was it, you know what, they were on fire, we certainly need to stop dribble penetration, but they're fixable problems?
Well, I was not alarmed. You know, I didn't go off the deep end throwing chairs or anything like that. It was more matter-of-factly that we got to play better. I was disappointed in some of the things that we did, and that's what we talked about. But also, when I showed them yesterday the tape, I showed them some good plays, and there just weren't enough of them. But I don't think that it was panic city, and you know, we knew going in that it was going to be a big-time game, and it was. It's just that we didn't match their play. But no, I don't think you can just blow it off though, and say, well, they just made a bunch of shots, because that's the easy way out. Because I'm one of those guys that I think you're accountable for everything. You know, when guys say my bad, it really ticks me off. I said that, you know, that relieves you of responsibility just because you say my bad, and I don't want it to be that. Yes, they played very, very well, but we didn't play the way we wanted to play, and let's take responsibility for that.
You guys have gone a few years now playing a little bit later in the schedule, a few weeks later than you have. What effect, if any, does that have? Do you feel like you know the teams better, or do you know more about your team? Does that have any effect on that game?
I don't think it has any effect. You know, a couple of years we played them in about the middle of the schedule and in the very last game. And, you know, the last couple of years, even with the snow game last year, the games have been very close time-wise. The game that Rivers made the big shot here at the very end, and then 2 weeks later, I think, you know, it was a totally different thing. But where it falls on the schedule, unless it's a time period where you don't have a guy and then you get a guy back. But by this time of the year, you know your own club pretty well, especially if they're experienced. You know, I'm still learning a lot of things about my guys right now, and I think that's going to continue to, but I don't think it's much of a factor.
Bryce and Kennedy were kind of better scoring the ball. They had more productivity, but probably weren't as great on the glass as you would have liked. How do you get them to kind of maintain that kind of scoring drive while, you know, kind of elevating their level against the boards?
Well, it's been the challenge for the whole year to do it not on the rebound, but do it on the defensive end as well. And that's because at times they do some good things offensively, and now we've got to get that same kind of production on the defensive end and the backboards both. But you know, if the other team shoots 69%, there's not a lot of rebounds to get, and so it's just part of the process that we've been going through with everybody. But you know, it's been more magnified with Bryce and Kennedy for sure.
Coach, I know it's been a very emotional time for you and for your staff, anybody that's worked here a long time. How emotional have the last 10 days been for the players?
You know, I don't think it's been as much for them. You know, it's been 18 years since Coach Smith was a head coach. And so those guys are 1, 2, and 3 years old, so they didn't see that part. They know a lot about it because they know the history and tradition here, and they know how I felt about it. But kids nowadays, I don't think are affected nearly as much about those kind of things as old guys are. And but you know, I said this a little earlier. I would be, you know, I've been on record as saying 64 years old and try to do things every day that would make Coach proud. But I would also be very, very sad because he would be disappointed if I wasn't giving it everything I had, regardless of what else is going on. And his wife, Linnea, told me last week, she said, remember, this is basketball season. And I said, I know. And, you know, there's been a lot of extra time and things spent, but I've just slept less and still had enough time to do what I was supposed to do or feel good about what we've tried to do in preparation.
I got that. I'm sorry.
Okay. You said go ahead.
Oh, okay. You talked a little bit on Monday about JP and you guys trying to get him back on the right track. How important is he against a guy like Winslow for Duke, who seems like he's really scary when he gets the ball and he's going to transition to wing?
Well, he's very gifted, very strong, explosive. Scary is not a bad word, but our entire defense has got to be aware of that. JP's got to be aware of that. Justin's got to be aware of that. We're going to have a little guy on him sometimes. They've got to be aware of that as well. But when you talk about the really good Duke teams, and this is one of them, I mean, they got 4 guys averaging in double figures, and so you got to guard everybody.
Coach, question from Greg Barnes. What is the key to properly defending and limiting dribble penetration?
Well, the key is quick feet, determination, and then drilling it that you get the guy on the ball to have a great deal of responsibility and get everybody else to be willing to show early, help early, to try to slow him down. But it's a tremendous problem with the ball handlers we have in the game today.
Okay, 1 or 2 more, and then we'll get 2 players in.
Coach, after the last 3 losses, different players have said stuff about they need to buy in more. They need to, in fact, after the Virginia game, I think it was Kennedy said, Virginia guys do exactly what their coach says to do. We need to do what our coach says to do. Do you feel like they're 100% buying in, or is this just a period where they're playing higher competition, they're just not playing as well as they need to?
A little bit of both, but I do believe the kids, there's a difference between buying in belligerently, not buying in. And I said this a little bit the other day, but I believe the kids know that what we're asking them to do is the right thing. But can you get your motor going hard enough? And I think that's the question of, it can't be just sprint back on defense one time. You got to do it every time. And buying into making yourself give that kind of extra effort. The one thing that we talked about more than anything with this team is the sense of urgency. They've even made up little signs to put in our locker room. Because I just had it written up on the board, if you want to be a great team, you've got to have a great sense of urgency. And that's where they understand it and they believe it, but still so far they haven't done it consistently enough. And, again, if you ask us, you said 3 of the last 4 games, if you had said Louisville at Louisville, you guys would probably say that might be pretty hard. Pitt at Pitt, that might be pretty hard. Virginia, even at Smith Center, ranked 2 or 3 in the country, that might be pretty hard. So, it's a little bit of both. That the competition is really good, and we've got to raise our level of intensity and do it much more consistent.
Last one for Coach.
Are you getting what you expected out of your junior class this year, Marcus Price, JP overall, what you expected in the year?
Well, I never have those expectations. It's the same thing every year. I've always answered about, well, where do you think you're supposed to be, or your record, and I never have. I just work your butt off every day, do the best you can do every day, and you know what, get up and do it again the next day. And that's what I've always believed in, so I never, I think if you set a standard, you also set a limitation. 2 years ago, well, last year too, Marcus exceeded a lot of people's expectations. So I didn't want to have an expectation that would limit him. I said, play your tail off. And the junior class, they've been pretty doggone good. But I always want more. But I don't think that I grade anybody until after the season's over with.
Coach, thank you.
Thanks,
Right here.